Hello, and welcome to the Our Prenup Lawyer podcast, where you and I get to learn more about prenups as I interview professionals from the fields of family law, couples counseling, and wealth management. I'm your host, Libby Garabedian. Let's get started. The information provided in this podcast is prepared by Our Prenup Lawyer for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. The information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship. This is not legal advice or a substitute for obtaining legal advice from an attorney. A person listening or watching should not rely upon it in any manner without engaging professional counsel. The podcast is intended to communicate general information and, because recorded, may not be current. On this episode of Our Prenup Lawyer, we have Bill Nelson. Bill is the founder of Pacesetter Planning, a fee-only fiduciary advisory firm specializing in financial planning for couples. He holds the designations of Certified Financial Planner and Certified Financial Therapist. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks so much for having me, Libby. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. Let's get right into it. So tell me, how did you get into financial planning?
Yeah, my journey in financial planning started with a relocation for my family. My fiance at the time, moved. Had to move for work, and I had to relocate as well. And so I took a job at a national investment management firm. Stuck around long enough to know that I really liked the industry, but really wanted to work with couples kind of in my own age range. And as you mentioned in the intro, I got married kind of in between leaving my job and starting my company. And so I was dealing with all these kind of newlywed financial questions just as I was reducing my income to zero to start the business and get it off the ground. And my wife and I learned a lot of money communication lessons the hard way. I think in no small part due to that dynamic. And so I've one thing's led to another, and I've really enjoyed helping couples navigate through those changes.
It's great to have your own personal experience and, put it into practice for other people.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you, what is a certified financial therapist? What do you do in this role?
It's a great question. So the Financial Therapy Association is a group of mental health practitioners and financial planners who have come together over the past 10 plus years to recognize that neither one of our respective industries um, does a great job at helping people, and I would argue couples in particular, navigate money, right? Financial planners, like myself, we like our spreadsheets, we like our models and things, but it ignores the emotional side of money. It ignores the personal finance is so often not a problem that can be truly optimized only in spreadsheets. Um, and on the mental health side of things, there's been a lot of data that suggests that mental health professionals in general just aren't money is a hard topic to talk about, and it takes a particular skill set that many mental health professionals don't have. And so as a result, we're all trying to come together to help kind of bridge that gap, so to speak. And so you'll find a lot of sort of financial therapists out there, some of which are mental health practitioners by training, others of which, like myself, are financial planners by training, but we try to kind of bridge the gap.
That's amazing because money is a very emotional thing. There's a lot
Mhm.
tied to it and affects different aspects of your life. So that's great that you guys are doing that kind of work. Um, so what services do you offer at Pacesetter Planning?
Yeah, I work with couples who are looking for a guide, right, to optimize their financial picture, to get on the same page and help them achieve their life goals together. I do most of my time is spent doing what I call comprehensive financial planning for couples, right? Everything from account structure to investments to risk management and everything in between, looking at it through the marriage lens, right? Identifying the right financial solutions for you as a couple that will work for both of you with your respective money histories and attitudes and values. As you mentioned, I'm a fiduciary, right? I don't sell investment products. I don't earn a commission. I'm legally obligated to act in my client's best interest. I do investment management for couples, but I don't require it, which is still relatively unique in the industry. And for couples who are really kind of focused on getting on the same financial page, right, that service is a good long-term option. But I usually find that there's a little bit more intensive work we need to do up front. So I have a boot camp of sorts that I put couples through, that can range anywhere from 2 months to 6 months, depending on the scope of the issues we're working on, that's really designed toward getting on the same financial page. So if you find yourself saying something to the effect of, money's the only thing we ever fight about, and we fight about it all the time, or we just don't talk about it because we know it will lead to money fights, right? That service is a good fit.
Why do you think that money is such a big issue or a cause of conflict for so many couples?
Because in a lot of ways, it's the last taboo in our society, right? Back in the day, right, people were taught that you're not supposed to bring up like politics and religion and whatnot, and polite company. Money is one of them. And as a society, we've gotten a lot more comfortable talking about a lot of those topics, but money has really lagged behind. Um, and so, it's a hard subject for us to talk about normally. And then, we also tend to get married a little bit later as a um, people are getting married later, and so you're not coming into the marriage fresh out of high school and kind of getting set up for the first time together like our grandparents might have. Instead, you might be on your own financially, so to speak, for a decade or even longer before you get married, and so the both the financial architecture you have and the habits and the way you go about doing these things tends to be a little bit more ingrained before you get married, and then we need to figure out how to do it together. It can be tough.
Right. So, what are the different phases of financial planning for couples? Like, maybe they are 10 years on their own and now they're entering marriage. What does that look like?
Yeah, I love that question because it really depends on whether we're looking at it from the financial perspective or from the marriage perspective, right?
Mhm.
Um, the phases of financial planning for couples that I see from a marriage perspective can fall in one of two buckets, right? You're either preparing for your life ahead or you're repairing from damage that has happened up until this point. And so, I get a lot of couples who reach out to me who are in the engaged and newlywed type space where we're, may or may not be having money communication challenges right now, but we want to make sure we're setting the foundation right to avoid those problems down the road. Or, money is something we've been fighting about for 10 plus years. We need to figure out how to move forward and kind of repair the damage that's done. And then on the financial side, right, the kind of phases are, first and foremost is kind of foundational, right? Are we living paycheck to paycheck? Do we have a plan in place for handling any debt that we have? Right? Are there kind of the more kind of foundational personal finance stuff that we need to work on? On the flip side, are you thriving financially, right? Are you making a lot of really good progress? And there's all sorts of things we can do to optimize when you're in that stage. Um, and then there's the in between, right? That I sometimes call the kind of good enough phase, right? Where you're not struggling financially, but you're also not thriving. And so to me, like there's a whole bunch of strategies. Like to me, those are the cases that I actually find are the hardest to work on from my perspective, um, for a whole bunch of reasons.
Right. Going back to this newly engaged or newlywed phase, can you walk us through the steps of how you create a financial plan for these couples or what big questions you might ask them?
Oh boy, yes. So certainly everything that I do, I'll just kind of add a note at the top, right, is context matters. And so whether the couple is engaged or has been married or has been married before, right? If this is a second marriage, right, that completely changes some of the scope of things that we talked about. But at a high level, right, the first thing that I like to focus on are the goals and like why those goals are important, right? What is your vision for your life 50 years from now? And then from there, how do we engineer goals that will help you actually get there? Then how do we implement the financial architecture that we need, whether it's bank accounts, whether it's investment accounts, or kind of all the above, to help get you toward those goals so that we're aligning your money with what's most important to you via the goals that we have. Certainly budgeting and savings plays a role in that as well. Kind of once we have the architecture in place, I have a few processes that I teach couples about how to monitor their progress over time and how to actually sit down and have meetings, so to speak, where we're communicating about money in a productive way. Um, and then certainly, like, yeah, layering in some financial protection strategies in place behind the scenes as well. It's nobody's favorite topic to talk about, myself included. Um, but we start by kind of focusing on what we want to have happen, and then from there we ask, what if things go off the rails, and how can we be proactive in helping to avoid issues with that?
What does financial alignment look like for couples who might be coming from opposite ends of the financial spectrum but are really looking to collaborate on their future?
It's normal, first and foremost, I would say, right? There is a growing body of research that shows that we attract our financial opposites. The most common thing that I see people talking about in that space is the quote unquote saver versus spender, where one member of the couple is really likes to save money. They like to see that bank account balance grow, and the other, it's not that they don't necessarily like saving or think it's important, but if they're given a choice between saving a dollar and spending it, they'd rather spend it.
Hmm.
Very, very common difference for couples to have. The other one that I see almost as frequently, but almost nobody talks about as much, it more has to do with financial risk taking, so to speak, right? How much cash do we feel like we need to have on hand before we start investing? How much risk do we want to take in our investment accounts? It's very, very common for couples to have really different answers to those questions. And there's a whole bunch of others that um, other differences that I see. But to answer the question, like how do we handle that, right? I think that it's important to recognize that again, it's very normal to have those differences, and you need to make sure that your financial plan addresses both of them. It's not that one of you is right and one of you is wrong. It's that we need to set up our financial situation so that you each are getting what you're looking for. And so usually that defines that includes defining kind of what it is that's most important to us as a family, um, really going back to the goals. Usually I find that couples have very similar goals at the end of the day. It's just how are we going to get there that can make it a little bit challenging. And so the degree to which we can focus on those goals and making sure that they're getting both of you what you're looking for. Um, that's the most likely thing that's going to set you up for success.
So those shared goals, the interests they have for their future, that's what's going to help reconcile the differences and bring them closer together.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how can couples financially prepare for major milestones in their relationship, like buying a house or having a kid?
Great question. Once again, right, there's the money component and there's the marriage component, I would
Mhm.
argue. And so on the money side, right, getting as specific as possible about the dollars and looking ahead to check for blind spots is really important. For example, if you're newly married this year, you're getting ready to buy a house and you want to have kids down the road. Um, it's not enough to just look at what your rent is right now and say, okay, if I'm paying X amount in rent right now, I can probably just afford to have the same amount as a mortgage. Maybe building in some room for maintenance and stuff without taking into account, like if you want kids down the road, we either need to plan for childcare or for one of us to stay home from work down the road. Like you need to be looking a few steps ahead to make sure that you're not boxing yourself into a corner with stuff like that. Um, and then on the marriage standpoint, I mean, usually I find that by the time couples come to me, they're kind of on the same page with things like this. It's usually those conversations about like, do we want to have kids? How many kids do we want to have? Happen a little bit earlier in the process. But I mean, obviously that's something you want to be open and talking about in real time.
If one spouse tends to take the reins financially and handles all the banking and accounting decisions, what kind of strain can that put on a relationship?
Yeah, it's a big problem. And the key word that you just said that makes it a problem is the decision component,
Hmm.
right? It is not inherently a problem, and in fact is actually pretty common for one spouse to execute on the chores, so to speak, right? To pay the bills, to manage the investment accounts, right, to track progress. um, it's pretty common for one spouse to be more inclined to want to do that. That I don't really have a problem as long as your spouse A knows what's going on, right? It's important for both members of the couple to understand at a high level where you're at financially and kind of how to get all the information that you need, right? Transparency is really important there. Um, but it's almost never okay for one spouse to be the financial decision maker, right? Particularly for big financial decisions. I don't care if one of you makes a lot more money than the other. I don't care if one of you stays. So like like the financial circumstances don't matter. You both need to get a vote when it comes to big financial decisions.
How can couples establish those healthy financial boundaries within their relationship so that they are collaborating?
Yeah, great question. And again, not to not to sound like a broken record. I understand that healthy financial boundaries look really different from couple to couple.
Hmm.
I mean, one of the most common questions I get from couples, particularly in the newlywed phase, has to do with whether we should be combining finances, right? Do we combine everything? Do we combine nothing? Do we combine some things? And I would argue that the right answer for you could be any one of those things, but the right answer for you is probably different than your best friends or like every couple has their own needs and that we should be accounting for. For example, right, you know, keeping some or even all of your finances separate can work as long as you have the shared goals and you can identify how you each are contributing to them. Um, but if one of you is a stay-at-home parent, that can be really problematic to have totally separate finances if one spouse isn't bringing in a paycheck, because what you've set up in doing that is a situation where the stay-at-home parent needs to basically ask their spouse for spending money or ask their spouse for a raise if they need to if they want more spending money. It can really create strain on marriages, right? Whereas for other couples, right, if you're both working, if you're both making the same amount of money, if you both are contributing to your savings goals in your own way, and you're communicating about money, like keeping separate finances isn't actually inherently a problem from my perspective. So I think a lot of it has to do with communication. Whenever I think about financial boundaries, I also want to just mention extended family. I actually, the bigger issues with financial boundaries that I see have to do with um, parents who may or may not need a lot of support, may or may not expect a lot of support, may or may not want to meddle in your family's personal finance situation. Um, Talking about money in front of young kids is generally something you need to be pretty careful about, right? Kind of managing boundaries with other family members is just as important as managing them within your own family. Whenever we talk about a boundary of any kind, right, we want to think about where is the boundary? How rigid or how flexible is it, right? And I think that's you want to make sure that you intentionally set up those boundaries appropriately, both within your own marriage and the broader family landscape you're dealing with.
I want to touch on that point you brought up about, maybe an extended family member, such as a parent needs support down the road, or perhaps a spouse loses their relationship. Excuse me, a spouse loses their job, or
Mhm.
there's a change in the economy. How can couples plan for the unknown?
It's a great question. And so first and foremost, right, I think it's always worth spending a little bit of time talking about worst case scenario is a strong way to put it, right? But things like life insurance, right? Things like other types of insurance, right? What were to happen if fill in the blank, right? Do we have a plan for how we can adapt to that? Um, do we have an emergency fund saved up? Is that a joint emergency fund or is that a completely separate emergency fund? I've seen cases where from one couple to the next, I'll tell a couple quick stories with that. Because I think it illustrates the point of like how you set up your financial boundaries. Like there's healthy ways to do it in any number of ways. Sometimes I find that for couples who are really hesitant to combine finances, the emergency fund is the one thing they feel like they absolutely can combine. No issues, right? If we want to have $30,000 or whatever it is just in case of emergency, like, we might not want to combine the rest of our finances, but like if my spouse is out of a job and looking for work, like I would want to be able to help him or her out. And so combining that feels very natural because it's there for both of you just in case you need it. On the flip side, I worked with a couple a few years ago where the wife was really, really hesitant to combine anything, right? To combine anything at all. And we discussed it and kind of explored it a little bit. And it came out that she had seen a case where her best friend, her husband left, took it, drained all the accounts, etc. Um, Through the divorce process, they were able to reconcile some of that, but she was really stuck for a while. And what she ended up saying is, I actually would be willing to combine everything as long as I have my separate emergency fund just in case. Like, just by keeping that part separate, I'm able to go all in with everything else. And that worked out really well for them. So it's a little bit of a tangent, but hopefully that gets to the question
Yeah,
you asked.
no, exactly. But having some of that reliability in whatever way works best for the couple, right? Like you had
Mhm.
said before, it's going to look different for everyone.
Mhm.
What budgeting or financing tips would you give to newlyweds?
Great question. First and foremost, technology is not necessarily a friend when it comes to budgeting, right? People look at me, they see I'm a millennial. I work with a lot of millennial and Gen Z couples, and they might assume that I'm very like tech savvy and tech focused with my client work, and I am in some areas, right, of the work that I do with people. But the more technology you introduce to the budgeting process, the more things go astray from my perspective. But before we get to that point, before we get to the point where we're talking about kind of managing the monthly budget, you want to get clear on what it is you're looking to budget for in the first place. Who cares about budgeting, right? Who cares about saving? What is it that we're looking to save money for? Is it to get out of debt? Is it to save up to buy a house? Is it, like what is it that we are actually looking to accomplish? And why is that important to us? From there, once you do that, right, you should be able to then set a savings goal for yourself or a debt payoff goal if that's the focus of your plan in the short term.
Mhm.
I count debt payoff as savings because it's money you're putting towards building your future in one way or another. Um, I like to teach couples to have one or two monthly savings targets that they are working towards, right? If your finances are mostly combined, you should have one savings target you're tracking across both of you. If your finances are mostly separate, we want to have each of you working towards a particular savings target. Now, to get to the point where you know what that is, um, you probably do need to go through a budget planner, right? Just to break down how much you're expecting to spend on rent and groceries and restaurants and entertainment and cars and all that stuff, right? You do want to break it down in that level of detail just to plan it out. But the goal is to not spend that much time going through those details in the long run. The goal is to break it out so that you know what your spending looks like, so that you know you're expecting to save $1,000 a month or whatever your particular number is. And then from there, that's the number you can track. Literally, all you need to do once a month, go in, pay off your credit cards, see how much extra money you have now compared to where you were a month ago. If that's over $1,000 a month, congratulations, you've hit your target. I literally don't care how much you spent at coffee shops. Like it literally doesn't matter. Don't fight about it. Don't do any of that. If you keep falling short, then that's when we need to go into the details and figure out kind of what changes we need to make so that you can hit that savings target going forward. Um, Two more notes on that, right? Obviously, like then once you have that savings target, you want to compare it to what your goals are. If you need to be saving $2,000 a month for that down payment and you're only saving $1,000 a month, that means you might need to make some changes to hit that in mind with that goal in mind, or change the goal depending on the circumstances. Um, and then the last thing is be patient with each other, right? Even for the most financially organized, financially savvy couples that I talk about, that couples that I talk to and kind of go through this process, I've never seen any couple have their like consistently hit their savings target right out of the gate. It always takes at least 3 months. Know that like you're making a best guess right out of the gate, and then from there you're probably not going to hit that number right away. It's going to take a little bit of trial and error to get into the swing of things together.
Like that point where, you aren't being hard on yourself and then you're adjusting your goals and your targets where you might need because obviously life happens. It's not
Mhm.
it's not linear.
Yeah, life happens, and it takes a little bit of time to figure out where, like, it's just like oftentimes people underestimate their spending out of the gate, right? They hear
Mhm.
budgeting and they assume that means they need to cut spending, and so they round a lot of things down that maybe shouldn't be rounded down. Make your best effort. Um, Kind of promise each other that you're trying your best, and give yourself some patience to get to that point.
Great. Thank you. Now, before we go, how can listeners reach you if they're interested in connecting?
Yeah, best place is my website, pacesetterplanning.com. There's a contact page there. You can fill out a form to chat with me. I offer free breakthrough sessions with anybody. You can also get a link to my book on there, Marriage Centered Money, which is the kind of goes through a lot of these topics in a lot more detail.
Great. Well, thank you, Bill. I will include that in the show notes, but it was great talking to you today.
Likewise, Louis, thanks so much.
That's our show, folks. Thank you for listening to our Prenup Lawyer. Make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to drop a comment below. Follow us on Instagram at Our Prenup Lawyer, and listen to us on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and watch us on YouTube. See you guys next time.